Aspiring entrepreneurs think of creating a startup. It has become fashionable to think of investors as in VCs and angel investors and so on and so forth. And while that is certainly a very popular and a very practical route for many of the startups, I think that should be our last choice, and that's because VCs and angel investors is the most expensive way of getting capital. Ideally, if you can bootstrap, which is create a startup with very lean cost structures, go ahead and get customers to pay for your for sustaining the startup. That is the most ideal way of building it. There are enough schemes available from organizations like SIDBI, where there is a debt available without collaterals, and that could be a very interesting option for many entrepreneurs to consider. And of course, there are a number of angel groups and early stage investors and VCs who support very early stage or concept stage startups as well. Typically, again, at the early stage, it is not about especially if you're taking money from investors, angel investors or angel investor groups, or from VCs who are investing in early stage companies. Your focus should not be about the valuation or how much money are they giving and how much equity they're taking. Of course, that's an important consideration. But beyond that, at the early stage, what you should be looking for is who is likely to add maximum value to what I need at this point of time. For example, if you're a concept stage startup which requires serious amount of handholding or assistance in, say, doing a B2B sale or doing many B2B sales, are the investors that I'm going to engage with likely to provide me access to those markets or access to some of those customers? That may be an important consideration. Many startups would require significant amount of handholding in just working through the business plan and the business case and navigating and making the adjustments as you go along. Typically, angel investors or angel investors group typically have a person or two from the investor group who would engage with that startup, and your decision on terms of whom you accept money from, of course, if you have, assuming that you have a choice. If you have a choice, then your decision about whom to accept the money for should be primarily on the basis of who is likely to add the maximum value to my startup, rather than who's providing me the highest valuation for the money that they're investing in. The value that investors would add at the beginning of the journey typically would be about helping you manage the complexities of building a business around that concept, which could be about making your business cases, making your business plans, making the adjustments as you go along. And typically, while the investment decision may happen when a certain direction has been agreed upon, which is like your business plan, etc., has been jointly been developed, the first 3-4 quarters of any startup are going to be the most challenging, not just purely from the the assumptions not going right, but also where you need to take strategic decisions on making the making the adjustments into the business plan, in the operating plan, in some of the assumptions, etc. And typically, investors who would get involved with you at that stage in working with you through some of these complexities would be the ones who would add maximum value to you, versus investors who would meet you once in a quarter at board meetings for review. Typically, when startups think of raising external capital from angel investors as VCs, they think of them as one block, and therefore they will start sending their business plans to all the VCs that seem to be popular, etc. Different individuals or different entities participate at a different risk stage of a startup. And broadly, if you were to think of it, there are 3 risk stages of the life of any company. At the beginning, there is what we call a concept risk, whether this idea will work and whether this team will be able to deliver on that idea. The second stage beyond that is what you would call the growth risk, or the in market risk, in terms of does this idea have the potential to create a fairly viable business. And beyond that is really the large scale up risk. At the beginning of the journey, when you're talking about a concept risk, when your assumptions are not proven, when it's just an idea, when you need to test it out, VCs are unlikely to be the people who are unlikely to be the people who will invest in that startup. You typically should go to angel investors, whether they're individual angels or angel investor groups that collectively co-invest in the startups. And that's the stage that, that's the risk stage that they are most comfortable with. Why are they most comfortable with that? Because that is a stage in which the investor also needs to spend a lot of time with the startup companies or in helping that team or guide that team through the business decisions. A lot of times you will waste time approaching investors and making pitch presentations. The bad part about the investor industry is that nobody ever says no. So you will probably hear concepts like, we think that this is exciting, and but we really don't have the bandwidth at this point of time. Perhaps at some later stage we would be interested. And most people go back and celebrate, hey, we met this VC and they said they were really excited with the product. Frankly, what that means is a polite no. And not necessarily because you're not competent or because they don't like the idea. Probably in most cases it is going to be because you are at such an early stage that it doesn't make sense for them to participate in. So clearly identify what stage or what risk stage you're in your journey, and find the most appropriate people who are most likely to invest at that stage of startups, rather than going into VCs at the beginning of the journey.